Hello everybody, welcome to a comprehensive look at the 1.0 version of Demon's Souls Remake. We have completed taking a look at Elden Ring's 1.0 version, a lengthy endeavor, so now we're working backwards, and taking a look at the game that came out before Elden Ring. One that was not only handled by a different developer, Bluepoint, but a project that has a whole different game as its base, so you should certainly expect this to be a whole different ballgame to Elden Ring. I know, I can already hear you saying, but Berto, your Elden Ring video was nearly 4 hours long. Why is this one so much shorter? Well, there's two key differences here. One, this game is vastly smaller than Elden Ring. While it has elements of free exploration, and every boss is technically mandatory, it's still by far the uncontested shortest Soulsborne game, so the sheer number of things to look for is drastically lower. And two, as mentioned, this game already has a reference point to build off of, as it's a remake. This means that they already knew what the final version of this game would look like before they even started on the project. Mind you, they did add some things, such as items hanging in cages in 3.1, but I even looked at those, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary to me from the final version of the game. So this is a surprisingly complete 1.0 version, pretty unprecedented in this day and age. They're actually so similar that you can boot up a save file that was played in current patch in 1.0 version, which I believe is not possible for other Soulsborne games. As for how the video will be laid out, I will be referring to the non-1.0 things as current patch, as opposed to release, in this video, which is patch 104. There's two reasons for this. Bluepoint stopped patching the game only like a month after release, and since it's coming up on 4 years since then, as of this video, I think it's safe to say it won't be patched again, so I'm treating 104 as the final version. And two, the versions in between these two patches, so 1.01, 1.02, and 1.03, are different to 1.0 obviously, but they're also fairly different from 1.04 in a lot of ways, because there's actually a good amount of changes in that final patch, so I don't feel like it'd be reasonable treating them interchangeably, certainly not in the same way I did in Elden Ring. I actually made a video a year after Demon's Souls Remake came out, where I did discuss a lot of things they patched in between the game's release, so if you're interested in that in particular, go give it a look as well, especially if you're interested in the speed on tech side of it. For visual aids, there will be a 1.00 label in the top right when showing 1.0 footage, and a current patch label when showing the final version of the game. That's it for setup and explanations I feel are necessary, so let's get into it. The first change we see is literally at the first window of the character creator. In current patch, body type A corresponds to the feminine body type, and B corresponds to the masculine body type, where in 1.0, these two were reversed. And the same goes for the animation type. Going into the game itself, this one is so subtle, I didn't realize until I played current patch after already finishing 1.0. When you kill an enemy in current patch, there's like a snap sound effect to confirm the enemy is killed. And when going back to the footage of 1.0, yeah, you can't hear it. It does add to the moment-to-moment gameplay, so it was a good addition. If you're unaware, if you reload the game anywhere in the tutorial, in current patch, it'll reset you all the way to the beginning. That includes respawning all the enemies and loot, but it also does remove the items you looted, and the in-game timer goes back to 0. This is actually a quite unique thing in the series, as these games are known to constantly autosave after most actions. This still happens in 1.0 as well, if you quit out the beginning segment, but once you reach the Forlorn Outpost, quitting out will only put you back at the beginning of the outpost. It doesn't respawn enemies and loot, but it does heal you all the way back to full. So if you wanted a full heal before Vanguard, with no risk of taking more damage before it, that's a good way to go about it. There's no difference that I could find with Vanguard, and after beating them you still get the OG fluted helm, so that's still there in 1.0. But one thing I did notice in this segment is that when Dragon God kills you, the classic "you died" sound effect doesn't play in 1.0. When it does in current patch, of course. We're gonna jump around a tad in areas here for this entry, but after playing the game a while, I noticed that if you bleed, poison, or plague an enemy, and then look away from that enemy, for whatever reason their health bar will bug out and disappear for the duration they're taking this lingering damage. It's definitely very annoying, because even direct hits you cause won't make the health bar show up, and this bug will only clear once the status effect is done, so you won't be able to see how much health the enemy has left for a while. Obviously this doesn't happen in current patch. Just in the beginning of 1.2, you can tell that the frame rate is not as good in this area in 1.0. It doesn't drop below 30 FPS or anything, but it's certainly choppier, and it absolutely is because of the red dragon flying around. To make it even worse, whenever the dragon breathes fire on the bridge, especially when you run alongside it with enemies still alive on it. The frame rate drops even more, and there's some audio clipping. So yeah, one of those obvious things that still need a polishing before release, but it was. There are these areas when I noticed that there's a few actions that the controller speaker was still allowed to pass through even when the function is turned off, namely the firebomb being lit before the throw. The only other one I noticed is when you remove armor, the controller will make a small sweep sound effect for that too. This one is kinda subtle too, but I noticed that at 1.0, when you're watching the Monumentals cutscene, you can still hear the fire crackling of the candles nearby.
A scourge of demons faced. In the distant past.
I think it does fade out during it, but it does seem to come back at the very end.
Alas, the other monumentals have perished, and only I remain.
So you can hear it before the cutscene ends as well. Maybe it never fades away, it's hard to tell because there's more noises in the brunt of the cutscene. But either way, the fight does cut out in current patch.
A scourge of demons faced.
As I played the game, I noticed that sometimes some of the items some merchants had stocked would have a visual dupe, but generally it didn't seem like I could buy them. I have no idea if this is a useful glitch in any way. I've certainly never seen this in current patch, as far as I can recall. Or at least it's probably way harder to have happen just casually. There was also some funky stuff going on with Thomas's storing. Sometimes weapons I had a few of would stack together like a consumable, when it certainly isn't supposed to do that. But at least with this one I did have those extra weapons, so it wasn't a dupe of any sort as far as I could tell. There was almost nothing to note in World 2. This is a good chance to talk about fog gates. After a certain patch, Bluepoint made it to where, intentionally or not, there's a small delay of a second or so before you can enter a fog gate if you just reloaded. In 1.0, it was as it was before that patch, where you can more or less enter immediately. This won't affect 99% of people, pretty much just speedrunners, and the effect on it is limited, but the main one that it does affect is Dragon God, so it was a good time to point it out. On to World 3, this is probably my favorite 1.0 quirk, and probably the most useful, at least to a casual playthrough. For whatever reason, in 3.1 on the 4th floor east wing, there's just an invisible floor in what's supposed to be a pit where you die. This is the wing where the singing lady is. This means you can skip that one hallway that connects the two wings from the outside, and go directly into the stairs. The only thing they have to be wary of is that the broken flooring holes do still drop you, so be careful of those. Another weird one. When I got to Riddell's corpse, I heard some really gross, muddy sound effects I've never heard before. And in the room next to it. It kinda happened randomly and I wasn't sure how to trigger it at first. I then noticed that it coincided with some spark-looking light effects in the rooms. I spent a little time trying to figure out what it was, but it wasn't until I went outside the rooms and heard the corpse ball in the floor below me that I clicked. This was the corpse ball causing this sound effect, but for whatever reason, the usual sword clanks against the floor and walls sound effect doesn't happen while in these rooms. And it seems like it only plays the movement of the body and arms moving around. This probably only worked because I had just passed the ball while getting here, and it was still aggroed when I was in the floor above it for whatever reason. If I had gone through another path, I might have missed this. I won't mention proper skips much, but this one was patched after release, so this is the only way to do this version of it. To briefly explain it, if you go around this wall next to the leg of the heart blocking your way to the man-eaters, and if you run at a particular angle, and are careful with your camera position, you can run around the lip of this wall, allowing you to forego dropping the heart and skipping pretty much the entire level. This was not only the first skip that was found in the remake, as it was sought out a lot due to it not being possible in the OG game, but it was also the first skip that was patched. There is a current patch version of the skip, but it's definitely a lot more tedious, not only to learn but to perform as well. In online play for 1.0, you can't skip the old monk cutscene. Probably. Here's the deal. At the launch of Demon's Souls Remake, if you were doing online play, you couldn't skip the old monk cutscene, as the game is looking for an online player to be the old monk. This was a carryover from the OG Demon's Souls, where the game needed a bit of a buffer so that the game had time to pick out and load in the online players. Here's the thing though, that was on the PlayStation 3. This is on the PlayStation 5, so it was very unlikely that was a necessity anymore. Or maybe they just needed to optimize a bit more. So Bluepoint would shortly make the cutscene skippable, and only had the time running up to the fog gate as a buffer, which was plenty. If the game didn't find someone, it usually just loaded in the NPC after you cross a certain threshold of the arena. The problem in my case is that 1.0 doesn't have online connectivity as an option anymore, or maybe it never did, so I can't exactly test if this is the case or not. Playing offline does allow it to be skipped, but I believe that was the case at launch as well. So this is simply an educated guess, but I want to add some context to this fight, as it was only like this for a few days, and as some of y'all may know, PS5s were extremely hard to combat at launch. A bug that was present at launch, but was fixed at a later point, was that to get the new providential rings from the crows, they're hawks apparently, you needed to trade the large sword of searching, but for whatever reason, the sword had to be made from a scimitar, otherwise they wouldn't accept it, and as you can expect, this was also a thing 1.0. This especially was a problem because there is a trophy for collecting all rings, and while you can start with a ring as a starter gift, and it counts, if you didn't start with it with the character where you're collecting the rings, you will have to get it like this, as rings collected don't count across save files. It has to be all 30 in the same character. Of course it is fixed now, so it's not a problem anymore, but do be wary of that if you're trophy collecting 1.0. That was all for World 4, and this will be the only thing for World 5, and it's the only 1.0 exclusive skip entirely. You couldn't do it at launch, or it was never found in the patches at launch or later. If you reload your game in front of the 5.2 barriers that section off the swamp area, and go into cinematic mode, the 4K but 30 FPS mode, you can just phase through certain parts of the barriers. I believe there's a few segments where you don't even need to go into cinematic mode and stay in performance, but it works either way with cinematic. This is due to how this game loads some assets slower in order to have the faster loading screens. The original game, and most of the Soulsborne games, loaded all it needed during the load screen, but Demon's Remake sometimes continues to load the collision of objects or walls a little later. And generally, this process can be slowed down even more with the cinematic mode, allowing for some skips in tech. A lot of them still exist in the game to this day. This just seems to be the one that they caught early on and got around to fixing, and can't be done in current patch. These next few entries were well known around the launch of the game, but there may be a lot of people who missed out on it. And well, they can be done 1.0 and not anymore. So here we go. Shortly after the game was released, it was found out that if you use a gold coin right in front of the Maiden in Black, then go to her level up screen, you can, well, do this. However, this isn't just a visual glitch. When you leave the menu, you keep whatever luck you had once you close the window, without needing to use any souls. This lets us know that there's no real cap on item discovery, because it does nearly guarantee any rare item drop you're going for if you abuse this, as long as the enemy doesn't already have a guaranteed drop item. For instance, this doesn't increase odds of pure bladestone, as the enemy already guarantees an item drop and simply alternates them. And it doesn't seem to increase the odds of getting the rarer item. But for that same enemy, you do have a greatly increased odds of dropping the Uchigatana, which has its own RNG. However, this isn't the only thing that luck affects. If you may remember, there is a weapon in this game that scales with luck, the Blue Blood Sword. And yeah. The damage increase does seem to drop off at some point. I usually just take it to 10,000 luck or so, but even at half of that or so, it still does a lot of damage. There isn't much else to say about it. It's definitely useful in New Game Plus cycles if you're mostly trying to get the trophies and all that, since you do have to at least do 2.5 playthroughs or so. Just a fair warning though, if you want to go for a luck build, I would highly recommend you do this first. You can still do it after, but there's much more benefit if you follow what I'm about to do, and I hope you have False King alive, because we will need him. When you do the gold coin glitch, try to have these numbers right here land on a big positive number. Usually I wait until luck reaches 4,000 and stop immediately, because if you wait longer than that, it will overflow into a negative number. Do not let it be a negative number. It's not unfixable if you do, but it wastes your time later. Once you have a high number here, I would recommend you get 2 more gold coins from any Fat official. One to do this glitch again later, and the other if you want to trade it for one of the trophy rings. It should be a guaranteed drop if you have high luck, so do it now. After that, go to King Allant and get grabbed by the Soul Drain attack. I believe it doesn't matter if this is the attack that kills you, but I usually have my health low enough to die to it. Then go back and grab your Bloodstain for a surprise. Yeah, if you didn't know, when you get de-leveled by Allant, he leaves the souls required for your next level in your Bloodstain, so you can level back up. But in our case, we glitched our number to be monstrous. For me, the number is actually so big that your soul counter is overflowed and won't go down for a little while. But yeah, you can use this to level your normal stats to the cap, which you probably can't do after the luck glitch normally, if you have a high number of required souls. And guess what? Since we got backup gold coins, we can just luck glitch again and rock the Blue Blood Sword. That's it for the gold coin trilogy, all impossible in current patch, but still doable 1.0. if you'd like to try them. After this, we are done with New Game, so a few things in the endgame. During the final cutscenes, I got Maiden in Black to be invisible for both of the final cutscenes. I believe this was because I left the area after True King, and then came back and triggered the cutscenes too fast. It's possible to think that can happen in current patch, but I've never seen it before there. There's a few differences in the credits actually. These are a few that I spotted personally, but it seems they're even shorter overall than current patch, as I put them side by side in 1.0 and did earlier, which I guess makes sense if they still had some work to do there. I will play both the credits at the end of the video, so you can see the whole thing yourself if you wish. The New Game Plus reward items are the same, but the little overlay that pops up are different for whatever reason. When you beat the game in current patch, you unlock a gallery with a lot of concept art, the cutscenes in the game, all those kinds of things. But unfortunately, this isn't in 1.0. Nothing is unlocked here, so I guess the feature wasn't ready yet. After beating the game, I did go on the hunt for the ceramic coins in fractured mode, something I haven't done yet at all in 1.0, but they were all in the same spot, so nothing to comment on in that regard. What I did notice is that when you go into the character tendency window in fractured mode, your character is mostly off screen. Obviously a bug, but it's not like this in current patch, or on normal mode in 1.0. And finally, I did obviously turn in the ceramic coins, 26 of them. I did get the key, and as expected, the penetrator armor is there. Getting the coins took a while, so part of me kinda wished it wasn't, so I had something worthwhile to add. But hey, it is here if anyone wanted to get it in 1.0, and rock it with a blue blood sword. Before we end, the last thing I want to talk about is a universal skip for 1.0, which was fine at launch, but was patched later on. The all-powerful force quit skip. I'll explain it as succinctly as I can. Basically, every archstone in the game has what I generally refer to as a level index. Meaning, say, that 1-3 has the level 3 index, just as 2-3 or 5-3, etc. The level index value is picked when you warp into a specific archstone of the world. We can store and save this value as we travel to a different world by bringing up the close game prompt, and then clicking on it as soon as you see the game load up the new world. When you reload, you will still be at the archstone you warped to before closing the game, but if you die from there, your save archstone will be the same world, but with the level index of the previous world you were in, and ROM warp you to the corresponding level index archstone of this world. This could even be done between different save files, so you can load up a different character to load an index, and just start a new character and get loaded into a part of World 1 you have no business being in yet. Obviously this is incredibly useful for speedrunning, and I've actually made a video on how it was used for speedrunning in this game. Actually the visuals I just used are from that video, since they were pretty good for visualizing what's happening. So here's that video if you want to see more of it. And yeah, those are all the differences I could find in Demon's Souls Remake 1.0. I didn't have viewer feedback for this one like I did for Elden Ring, as it didn't warrant multiple videos. And while I'm far more confident I covered nearly everything because of how much smaller the game is and how familiar I am with it, if there is anything you're aware of that I did miss, feel free to let me know in the comments below. As I mentioned, this is a very surprisingly finished 1.0 version. Basically, most of the differences are just things that needed polishing. It's a perfectly viable version of the game to play if you don't care much for the online aspects of it. It could even be a better experience if you want to mess around with some of the glitches that were patched out by the final version. I have already made a poll on what's the next Soulsborne game people would be interested in seeing the most, and Bloodborne was the winner, so I'll get to that one a little later this year. Though I'll first have to scout out the amount of differences there are to talk about, and see if it warrants a series first, or a singular video like this one. In the meantime, if you'd like to show your interest for these videos, the best thing you can do to show that is subscribing, as I would certainly like to do videos for the rest of the modern From Software games. For financial support, I do have memberships and supers open if anyone would like to throw in a quick buck. As I'm sure you know, Elden Ring DLC is on the horizon, so I will be taking some time to enjoy that and make videos for it. But even if I do make videos on it for a long time, I'll still make time for Bloodborne 1.0. Just being transparent that this will happen, but I do hope that you enjoy the DLC and my videos on it as well. Alright, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for watching and anything you choose to do. I hope to see you around. Bye bye.